Thursday, this fall on Fox, Pitch is the dramatic and inspirational story of a young pitcher who becomes the first woman to play Major League Baseball. Pitch premieres this Thursday on Fox. Welcome back to Drennan Live here on Sportstime Ohio and Fantasy Football Time with our expert Ryan Fowler of FoxSports.com. He joins us now. A lot to cover this week. A lot of people are asking, is it too late to start over already with fantasy football? And I know that there is a lot of injuries, a lot going on. But you guys update your rankings every Wednesday and Saturday, so you can go to foxsports.com/fantasy and find all the rankings there to keep up to date and whatnot. But we'll start, and there's so many injury, and more injury is what's going on. And you look at the running backs, and running back by committee now is the approach of a lot of teams. So just kind of take us through that and the impact these running back injuries are having on these teams.
Well, Ashley, I think this is why DFS sports have become so popular, especially with fantasy football, because you can start new every week. And week two, it was ugly. And the running back position was already a little thin to begin with. And now you lose all these quote-unquote RB1s, RB2s, some RB3s go down due to injury. And some of them have definitive timetables, like Amir Abdullah. He goes to the IR, and we're not going to see him the rest of the year, or maybe after 8 weeks, but we'll pump the brakes on that. And then some have some vague timelines, like Arian Foster. But the big one, Adrian Peterson, with the meniscus injury, he's going to be out at least a couple months. So the big names there were Jerick McKinnon and Matt Asiata. Now, a couple of years ago when AP was suspended, McKinnon and Asiata did a little bit of a timeshare then. McKinnon only played in 11 games. That was his rookie season. Asiata scored 10 touchdowns. So a lot of questions around Minnesota right now. And they did sign Ronnie Hillman on Wednesday, but we're going to hold off on him until he shows that he has anything left in the tank. McKinnon in PPR leagues, I think, has enough value to pick him up. I think he actually has value enough because of volume to pick up in both leagues. Just remember, though, Matt Asiata is going to finish drives. If they get inside the 10, inside the 5, do not be shocked if Jerick McKinnon gets the ball taken out of his hands and it's going to be Bradford through the air or it's going to be Asiata on the ground. He scored 10 touchdowns in 2014, so he's done this before, and he's had little bursts here and there. Another big one is up there in Detroit. Amir Abdullah's got a foot injury, went under surgery. Now, Theo Riddick was the guy that had a monster first week for the Lions. He's in that PPR role. I think he's owned in most leagues anyways. So now we look at Dwayne Washington. Dwayne Washington, the rookie, averaged 4.5 yards per carry during the preseason, scored a couple times. This is where between the tackles rushing, I think Washington, he's going to get a look because they might sign Joique Bell, they might not. Dwayne Washington, he's going to be started, and I have to start him in actually 2 leagues this week. So those two scenarios right now are the biggest ones that we're keeping an eye on.
Yeah, it's obviously very hard when you have the top running backs that you thought were going to carry you through the season, right? When you have a standard league, and you got to look at the waiver wire now and really just the approach now as you go through. I know here in the office, a lot of people trying to make trades and go through things. So maybe a standout that you saw this week, who's on the top of that list now?
Well, I mean, again, when I went into the waiver wire after the first week, it was very picked over. I mean, there weren't any guys that were diamonds in the rough just waiting to start. And now because of these injuries, it really hasn't allowed too many people to really rise to the top and take over that RB1 role. You are having even more committees now. So when you look at what D'Angelo Williams is doing for Pittsburgh, when you see what David Johnson is doing for Arizona, those guys' value in fantasy football is so far ahead of any wide receiver right now because you can't find that type of production around the league after you bounce out maybe outside the top 6, top 7 running backs right now. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott, 20 touches per week. David Johnson, the same. D'Angelo Williams until Le'Veon Bell comes back. And then that turns into a committee. So the guys that are going to be the guys to look at on the waiver wire are Dwayne Washington, are Jerick McKinnon. They are just these rentals that we are using in these committees because not anybody has really taken the reins and said, we're the RB1 here, like David Johnson, like D'Angelo Williams, like even Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas. I mean, down in Carolina, Jonathan Stewart's going to be out 2 to 3 weeks. And now you got Fozzie Whitaker, a familiar name, Cameron Artis-Payne, we'll see if that works out. And then Mike Tolbert, the old bowling ball, might fall in the end zone. And then in Tampa Bay, one other one. Doug Martin's out an indefinite amount of time, maybe 2-3 games. So they're starting Charles Sims, who's a PPR value play. I think he'll get plugged into a lot of lineups this week. But their RB2 is Jaquiz Rodgers, who's bounced around the league. the last 4 or 5 years.
We're talking to Ryan Fowler of FoxSports.com, our fantasy football expert. You can follow him at Fox Sports Fowler, and we have a lot of questions, as you can imagine, from the fans. And I know we'll kind of dive into this running backs by committee thing a little more on a basis of what these guys are going to ask you. So Mikey Rutt is first up for a question, Ryan. He says, in my flex, should I play Langford, Sammy Coates, or Shane Vereen?
Well, Langford did score on Monday night, but we have this situation there in Chicago where Jay Cutler's probably going to be out at least a couple games with a thumb injury. So Brian Hoyer, another familiar name, gets plugged into the starting role there in Chicago. Now, this is a variable change, but when I look at Coates and I look at Vereen, Rashad Jennings, another running back, one that got hurt over the week, he might have to play with a wrap on his hand. So there's going to be a vague timeshare between Vereen, the PPR value play there in the Giants backfield, and Rashad Jennings just kind of lingering with this hurt hand. The surest thing right now is we know Langford is the running back there for the Chicago Bears. Sammy Coates, he had one big play in the last game, and then he was kind of quiet the rest of the game. I think Jeremy Langford's the play there just because it is the sure thing, and that's what you're looking for in week 3.
All right, Alan France, this is, up in the air here. He would like 2 good running backs, just 2 good ones, to start this week in FanDuel lineup.
D'Angelo Williams is our top running back in our weekly rankings at Fox Sports. And then again, David Johnson. I think, again, when you look at these timeshares and you're trying to plug in a DFS lineup, you need that sure thing. And volume-based. D'Angelo Williams has been a monster the first 2 weeks. And then David Johnson, it's a tough matchup a little bit with Buffalo, but I think that's the direction I would be going.
And again, updated rankings Saturday nights and Wednesdays at FoxSports.com. Joe DeCesar, Brandon Marshall, and Dante Moncrief questionable. So should I put in Michael Floyd or Alan Hearns as his starters?
Yeah, he asked that question earlier in the day. And since he asked that question, Dante Moncrief's out about 2 months with shocking an injury. So Dante's out. Brandon Marshall, it's not looking good. I moved him down in my rankings just because it doesn't look like he's going to be able to start. So right now, it's looking like you're going to start the 2 guys on your bench.
Ted Cusick, PPR League, need a 3rd receiver. So, and he had Moncrief in there too. So Sanu or Travis Benjamin?
Travis Benjamin. The Colts defense right now, just you can pick it apart. And I know with Keenan Allen going down and Danny Woodhead going down for the Chargers, they've had some bad luck. Somebody has to catch Phillip Rivers. And I think Antonio Gates could have a little bit more of a renaissance again as he's on the later legs of his career. But Travis Benjamin, he made some moves, and I think he's the smarter play this week. I understand Sanu because against New Orleans, there's some argument to be made there, but I think Travis Benjamin against the Colts is the way I'd go.
Next up, Todd Lang. I have Matt Ryan versus Saints, Big Ben playing Philly. Which one should I play?
Great matchup for Matt Ryan, and we saw what Matt Ryan did to Oakland last week, another bad pass defense. Still going to give the edge to Roethlisberger. I know, Philly, their defense is good. It's not great. And Big Ben, I just trust a little bit more than Matt Ryan. Because just when you think Matt Ryan is that Matty Ice that we remember from his rookie season, even going back to Boston College, he kind of lets us down. And, Julio Jones can only do so much in that offense. I'm going to give the edge to Ben Roethlisberger.
Second part of Todd's question, with Danny Woodhead hurt for flex, play Crowell or Coleman from the Falcons?
Great question. I'm going to go Coleman. If it's PPR, it's definitely Coleman. Crowell's going to have a chance to do something because right now with Kessler coming to start, it's just that offense, it's going to be kind of churning along right now. And Crowell's been the one constant in that backfield through the first 2 games. The one thing I do want to point out, Crowell had that great run against Baltimore for 85 yards, but I think the rest of the game, it was something like 17 carries for 47 yards. It's really hard to rally around that after the one big play.
Well, James says, and kind of piggybacking off this with the Browns, do you then bench all skill players like a Corey Coleman, who had a great game with the rookie quarterback in Kessler starting this week?
Yeah, and it's tough because the Dolphins got torched by Jimmy Garoppolo. So there is some room for some skill position players to make some noise. We're still waiting on Gary Barnidge. I thought that was going to work with Josh McCown, but the poor guy, he's walking wounded game in and game out, so we have to pump the brakes on that. I would probably fade every Brown skill position player this week if I had to. If you twisted my arm, Coleman may score, but I just don't know how Kessler's going to perform. Hugh Jackson said, trust us. Yeah. I don't know if fantasy owners should this week.
How did I know that was the answer that was coming to probably sit all the Browns players this week, right? Mike says with Abdullah out for the year, who's a better pickup, Theo Riddick or Dwayne Washington?
It's a great question, and the answer is going to be it's a timeshare. I don't think Theo Riddick's role is going to change in Detroit. Theo Riddick has some monster games in previous seasons, but because, again, they have always had really a running back by committee. Sometimes it's been 2 players, sometimes it's been 3 or 4 players. When you look at Joik Bell and Javid Best, they've had some names roll through there. They're going to give Dwayne Washington a look because they have to. If they're going to compete in the North, they need to know what they're going to get out of Washington. I think Theo Riddick's the better talent, especially in PPR leagues. I think he's going to be flexed in a lot of leagues this week. But Dwayne Washington, in standard leagues, I think you have to give him a look.
Talking with Ryan Fowler of FoxSports.com. Follow him at Fox Sports Fowler for all the expertise on fantasy football. A few more, and Hogan wants to know, is Victor Cruz this week a must start with Josh Norman shadowing Odell all over the field?
I love the deep cut. That is great analysis. And, Norman, he talks a lot. They haven't been putting him on the top receiver either. They've been moving Norman all over the field. So we'll see. I mean, he might start on Beckham. There might be plays where he covers Beckham, but there have been reports where if Beckham goes to the other side of the field in motion, Norman's going to stay on his side of the field. This is what's kind of been the grief that has been thrown his direction because he's not moving with the top receiver to shadow him. So Cruz, I think there is some value in flex leagues and in leagues where you start 3 wide receivers. Outside of that, he's probably not going to start.
All right, Gary wants to know, and Browns fans have been hoping Carson Wentz didn't do what Carson Wentz has been doing in the first 2 weeks. He's looked great. So do you start him against the Steelers defense?
I do not. There are a lot of talented fantasy quarterbacks. Again, I don't know who his other option is, but I would not force that issue against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's defense is good, not great. I think it's kind of in that middle range right now. And Carson Wentz went up against the Browns defense, and it's went up against the Bears defense. They are not really good. So when you look at Jordan Matthews' numbers and Carson Wentz's numbers, he needs a test. This will be a big test. The shocking thing is it wouldn't shock me if he passed the test, but I don't think Carson Wentz is somebody I'm going to start in week 3 against the Steelers. Steelers are playing good ball right now.
Angelo has a trade question for you. Someone proposed him a trade. He has Mark Ingram for Mike Wallace.
I'm holding Mark Ingram. I don't know if he noticed, but there's a lot of running backs hurt, and I want to keep my RB1s. I know Ingram's had a slow start, but that Saints offense, once it gets rolling, I think that's the guy that I'm going to want. Mike Wallace, 2 touchdowns last week against the Browns, but the rest of the game and the targets, they're pretty low. I think that would be an overpay to give up on Ingram this early.
Okay, Andy, our last question for Ryan says, should I start Stephon Diggs over T.Y. Hilton this week?
Ooh, that's a good question. Stephon Diggs has had a hot start for the Vikings and with 2 different quarterbacks. He had Sean Hill week 1 and then Sam Bradford and him. They did some work against the Packers on Sunday night. I'm still going to give the edge to T.Y. Hilton. With Moncrief out, more targets for T.Y. Hilton. We'll see how Philip Dorsett does for Andrew Luck. But that Chargers pass defense, you could pick that apart a little bit. So I'm going to give the edge to T.Y. Hilton, although I do like the options.
Information overload from Ryan Fowler, FoxSports.com, and a lot of injuries, and who knows what's going to happen now in week 3, but we will have you next week to sort everything through. Don't give up yet, everyone, right? Is the message still, it's okay, it's a long season. But thanks for the great insight as always. You can follow him at Fox Sports Fowler. We will talk to you next week, Ryan.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Again, those updated rankings you can find on FoxSports.com every Wednesday and Saturday. Keep it right here on Drennan Live. Coming up, we'll talk about the Tribe game tonight. That's next here on Sportstime Ohio.